Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Ruffner. I'm with Cambridge Quantum Computing, and I want to thank you all for joining us for this panel at 8 o'clock in the UK. So I appreciate you staying on to listen to us. Thank you very much. What we wanted to do is have a panel highlighting leading UK startups in quantum computing. And so I'm happy to be joined by these three colleagues who all have very interesting stories and startups. And I can't wait for you all to learn more about them. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves one by one, have them introduce each other. That would be fun. Have them introduce themselves one by one. And let's start with Dr. Ashley Montanaro from Phasecraft. So Ashley?
Great, thanks very much, Denise. And yeah, thanks also for this invitation to be here this evening, and to all of you for tuning in. So I'm Ashley Montanaro. I'm a co-founder of Phasecraft, which is a quantum software company. So we interpret this word software quite broadly. So we're interested in everything ranging from underpinning mathematics through to designing and optimizing quantum algorithms, through to actually running those algorithms on real quantum hardware. And our goal is to get the most out of near-term quantum computers. So by which I mean the sort of quantum computers that we have now or might have in a few years' time, as opposed to the kind of quantum computers that we might have in 10 or 20 years' time. And we do think that there really are some exciting applications lined up for this sort of era of quantum computing, in particular in areas related to the modeling and simulation of quantum mechanical systems, with applications to, for example, the design of novel materials, thinking about perhaps better batteries, better solar cells, that kind of thing, solving some really challenging problems in this area that go well beyond the capacity of classical methods. So we think that this really is a pivotal moment in the history of quantum computing, and we're very excited to be involved in that. The company was set up a couple of years ago now by myself, Toby Cubitt, and John Morton, my colleagues. And we're based in Bristol and London, and we have a team of around 10 people, all working on quantum software and related areas. So I'm really excited to be here this evening and to discuss with you all about this area.
Thank you, Ashley. And I also want to mention that you just announced that you're collaborating in a $10 million consortium. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So this is a really exciting project for us. It's a project jointly with Rigetti, the University of Edinburgh, and Standard Chartered, and Oxford Instruments. And we are working with these partners to bring a Rigetti quantum computer to the UK, and also to develop the software and applications and algorithms for that, which is our particular interest in Phasecraft. So we're going to be looking at developing applications for this machine, which will be a sort of really exciting resource to have in the UK. And again, our particular interest here is to look at applications to do with modeling quantum systems. But this is a great opportunity, and I think it sort of exemplifies our goal of working with the best hardware manufacturers worldwide, and also the best partners to really get the most out of these kinds of machines.
That's great. That was a great announcement. So congratulations.
Thanks very much.
I actually didn't know Oxford Instruments was involved. I love Oxford Instruments. That's great. Our next panelist is Cristina Escoda from Orca Computing. She's president and COO and co-founder. So Cristina, can you tell us a little about Orca?
Thank you, Denise. Yes, absolutely. So at Orca, we're building a quantum computing platform based on optical fiber, which is something that has never been attempted before. And we're able to do that thanks to our core technology, which is a quantum memory, originally developed by our team at Oxford. And the amazing thing about the memory is that it let us synchronize quantum operations, photonic quantum operations, and therefore overcome some of the challenges that have plagued photonic quantum computing to date. By working in optical fiber, the things just become much more interesting, because suddenly we can build a platform that's much more modular, scalable, and flexible than what has been attempted before, and that uses less many less redundant components. We are a very young company though, so all of this is in development, but we're doing very good progress. We were set up not even a year ago, October 2019. We're 4 co-founders, Professor Ian Walmsley, who's currently also provost at Imperial College, Dr. Josh Noon, who's at the University of Bath and also with us, Orca, and then Richard Murray, who used to be part of Innovate UK and more recently Teledyne. And we're growing the team very rapidly. We're 11 people at the moment, always looking for talent and incredible scientists, engineers, and especially in the optical space. So, if you're interested in current opportunities, without wanting to make this an advertisement, but talk to us.
Great, and I think in August, so last month, you announced a pre-seed round of £2.9 million.
That's right.
That correct?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes,
that's a great start.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Sebastian Weidt from Universal Quantum. So
hey guys.
Looking
Hi.
forward to hearing about this. Hey, Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really great to be here. So yeah, Sebastian Weidt, I'm CEO and co-founder of Universal Quantum, and also lecturer in quantum technologies at the University of Sussex. Universal Quantum is a spin-out from the University of Sussex and is building quantum computers based on trapped ions. So one of the reasons we like trapped ions is we don't really have to cool the architecture down to minus 273 degrees C, which is, for example, the case with silicon qubits. They're generally very well isolated from the environment, and with that come, some of the world record-breaking fidelities that have been achieved so far generally in quantum computing. Now we're actually quite different to a lot of the trapped ion approaches out there. So generally, if you look around the trapped ion community, people generally like to use lasers to implement these quantum gates, and that works really well on smaller scale systems. However, there's quite a strong scaling between the number of qubits that you have in your system and the number of laser beams that you need. And if you then are passionate about larger scale systems, which is really where Universal Quantum lives, we really are passionate about million qubit systems. That is our aim. That's where we will be eventually. So we took a different route, and instead of using lasers for our quantum gate implementations, we actually use globally applied microwave and RF fields. And with that, we've developed a technique which completely removes that correlation between those control fields and the number of qubits you have in your system. So for us, technically, a million qubit quantum computer could be operated with a handful of globally applied microwave fields. So that's number one. The other thing, and it was mentioned before as well, is that quantum computing architectures really should be modular, in our opinion, if you want to scale up to the sort of system sizes that we're most certainly passionate about. And in the trapped ion community, actually, there are a couple of approaches out there to connect individual quantum computing modules. And again, a popular way of doing that is to use photonic interconnects, which is a really exciting technology. But there are some challenges with that sort of technology in terms of speed and losses, etc. So we actually use, again, we're different here, use a different technology whereby we use electric field links between quantum computing modules and thereby remove that detour via the photon. And photons are great, so and Orca are doing great work there. But for us, we didn't really want to take that detour and took a direct approach where we can physically move qubits between quantum computing modules. So from that, you can maybe see that we will build smaller scale machines, but we really are set up to do the engineering required to get to a million qubits. That's Universal Quantum. We raised our first bit of money towards the end of last year, 3.6 million, and are currently really focusing on doing what is in many ways the sort of classical engineering that's required for us to scale up our machines. And yeah, very, very much looking forward to having a conversation about that.
That's great. I love your new spin on ion trap, which is different than a lot of the other approaches. So I'm very interested to see how you guys do. Wanted to ask you, so Christina and I both live in Southern California, but Christina has a lot of venture capital experience in both the US and the UK, and my experience is probably more US. But I'm wondering if each of the panelists would comment about the startup environment in the UK and how you feel. Has it been supportive? Are there a lot of opportunities? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about it. I know that Ashley being part of that big grant certainly is really great for Phasecraft. So maybe each of you can give your opinion or tell us a little bit more about it.
Okay, so shall I go then? So yeah, I think the UK is a great place to have a quantum startup. I think this is demonstrated by the number that are sort of springing up now. I think, you know, in an ideal world, I would like to have more, but I think if you look at other countries in Europe, for example, I think the UK really compares very favourably, and I think one reason for that is the fantastic science base in the UK, the support for quantum information, quantum computing, other aspects of quantum technologies over the years. But more recently than that, the sort of very targeted support at sort of bringing quantum technologies into industry. So demonstrated through sort of Innovate UK funding, for example, which for us has been fantastic, as well as the project with Rigetti that you mentioned. We have another project funded via Innovate UK, working with Johnson Matthey and UCL on developing quantum computing for battery technology, modeling battery materials. And you know, as well as these specific Innovate UK schemes, there are many further opportunities for collaboration with universities via the Quantum Technologies Programme and elsewhere. So I think that universities are very keen on quantum tech startups and spin-outs. And I mean, certainly the University of Bristol, where I am, has been very, very supportive. And I think this is true more generally. So I think it's a really sort of fertile environment at the moment. It's a great time if you're an academic to think about setting up something in the startup space, or if you're not, getting involved in the quantum tech community.
That's great. Sebastian, can I ask you to talk about the UK, and then we'll have Christina do the US and UK?
Sure. I mean, a couple of things, and Ashley mentioned some of the key points. I think talent, quantum talent, is a big part for all of us, and in many ways is a bottleneck. But the UK is actually really well set up there. We've got great quantum hubs, we've got training centers, so it's actually a really great environment to work in, and there's a nice network that's been established in the UK. I think one thing I would like to add, and Innovate UK is great, and we've got some Innovate UK funding as well recently, but we really need to think bigger, in my opinion. These machines, especially on the hardware side, a bit different to the software. This is really, really expensive, and that is where you heavily look at venture capital funding, for example. And there we do see a strong difference between the US and Europe and the UK. And I think I very much invite the sort of European investment community to lean on some of the approaches that their US colleagues take in terms of risk appetite and that sort of longer term vision we're looking at. And it's one of the things that we at University of Quantum actually took quite seriously, and for that reason decided to take investment from the US. So we have some US investors and also some European investors, which will hopefully help us for the next round, which need to be significantly bigger. But I think it's something that Europe, and especially the UK as well, if you want to stay in that sort of nice leading position that in many ways we have in key parameters, that investment needs to happen and needs to be increased significantly. Not saying we're not in a good position right now, and there's some great funding schemes out there, but we need to be on a completely different level to remain competitive. Yeah.
Christina?
And yeah, I'm jealous of the Bay Area, etc. The bit more capital being thrown around there.
It cuts both ways, but I think you made a great point. I think some of the things that actually are very attractive, excuse me, in the UK are the incredible pool of talent and the high density of startups, right? And the support that there's been from the government in order to create collaborations and so on. Now, I think the challenge will be for the next rounds of some of these companies to actually attract the capital that will be needed to take the company into the next level. And this is something that actually will have to be coming from private investors. So, I mean, it looks like, you know, we're all here very aware, but I fear sometimes for some of the younger or maybe least experienced startups in the UK. Compared to the US though, there's also the flip side where the US environment is much more disjoint and competitive. And it's also dominated by the big whales, you know, in the field. I mean, the Google, IBM, Microsoft, Honeywell, Amazon, even more medium-sized companies like Zapata are by size larger than, you know, the average UK company. And so, you know, it is actually it is harder to find talent in the UK compared in the US. I feel, because, you know, these big companies just suck everyone they can and they just grow their teams. And on the maybe not so positive side too, sometimes the efforts are too commercial too early, in the sense that, you know, we're still in a very young industry. We have to be cautious about what's feasible, what's not, be very transparent about roadmaps and expectations. And I feel in the US, sometimes investors push companies, especially startups, to really promise and even just aim for unrealistic goals. And so, you know, I think there's sometimes a little bit of a disconnect in that front, but hopefully, you know, the idea in the world we live in is to merge the best of both worlds, right?
Thanks, Christina. And I'm laughing because Ross Duncan is firing questions at the panel already, as we would expect. So why don't we take a look at Ross's questions? And he wanted to ask both Christina and Sebastian if you could give us a preview on how much computer you think you'll have when, just to understand the timing of that you're thinking of when you are going to be bringing your technologies out. And I realize it's very early and very hard to predict. So this is, as usual, a leading question, an intense question from Ross. But can you guys make any projections or any comments? I hear your aspiration of 1 million qubits. Any ideas on timing, Sebastian, or can I get a little more out of each of you?
I mean, I will not take IBM's approach of you know some of the announcements that we've recently heard there. I think we need to you know, we're very optimistic that our technology will take us there, and I think that is actually what we're truly passionate about. I will not sit here and say, hey, you know, this is going to be great, and in 5 years' time or you know 8 years' time, you're going to have 1 million qubits. I think we need to be cautious that we don't you know, burn out this field before we actually get going properly and overhype things. I think, you know, one can be very passionate about the technology. That is what we are. I will not sit here and lay out our exact roadmap right now. I hope people can understand that. But I think, you know, for Universal Quantum, we are a new startup as well, which means, you know, one can rebrand machines at universities that we could rebrand as Universal Quantums. But the first machines that Universal Quantum, which are developed from scratch based on our sort of unique approach, will be a couple of years until they will be available. I will not say right now exactly what they will be able to do in terms of qubit numbers, etc. Stay tuned. But the key thing for us really is, and I want to make sure that comes across, is you know, we're taking an engineering heavy approach, which means what we're actually focusing on right now is to do the key engineering that will take us to the thousands, 100,000s of qubits, rather than right now squeezing the most out of, you know, what most people already have in academic labs to get to 50 qubits or 70 qubits. Be very proud about this, and, you know, Ashley would be able to do amazing things with that. But I think it also needs some people in the community to think about those larger scale systems to actually really start doing what we're all passionate about and all excited about what quantum computing will eventually do for us. And that is reflected in our roadmap. But I won't join this game of saying, hey, Google said they'll do it in 9 years, so I'm going to say we'll do it in 8 years, and we're all going to sit there and not look very good in a few years' time when we're not quite there.
Yeah,
Go on, Christina. Go on.
No, I was going to say that I'll give an answer similar to Sebastian's. In maybe because we have the benefit of being younger companies, and I mean I would even go to say generation 2.0 of quantum hardware. We are not necessarily as focused on the actual numbers of qubits as our metric of success, right? I think that's a little bit of an old school approach when we didn't know better, right? But I think now we do know better, and we have understood that putting together something that's modular as a building block and then an architecture that scales is much more powerful potentially than having 10 qubits and then 20 and 50 and just squeezing each increasingly with harder and difficulty and more resources. So we do have an internal timeline, but again, I mean, we're very aware of the uncertainty around it. Similar to Sebastian, I think our timeline is between 1 and 2 years to have out a system. But again, it will not be competing on number of qubits. It'll be competing on architecture rather. I
think the key thing really is that I think we all need to be aware of, right? I mean, Ashley will tell us great things that we can do with 50, 100 qubits, and super excited about that. But really, I think there's a need in this community to not only focus on the sort of system sizes that we see currently, and keep adding another qubit and another 10 qubits, just because we know where we need to be eventually. And I think that's really the area that Universal Quantum really wants to fill out, really being those sort of guys that think about larger scale systems. We will have smaller scale systems for Ashley to play with as well, no doubt. But the key difference will be that what you implement on our computers, that underlying architecture, we can show you very easily how we can then double or exponentially increase that system size. And I think that's key, rather than implementing something on an architecture where you don't really have confidence in how you're going to double your qubit numbers. How are you going to, now that you've done this proof of principle algorithm, how can I get to the required numbers to actually change someone's life, to solve a real world problem? And I think that's absolutely key, that we get to that point, that we can make that sort of claim that you're going to work with a smaller scale system with us, but the underlying architecture that implements your architecture naturally scales up. And I think that's absolutely key.
I think that is key, and I appreciate the lack of hype. So I think that's great. Ashley, what do you think the biggest challenges in the industry in the moment?
Right, I think we really can't overlook the huge technical challenges involved in getting a large-scale quantum computer, or even a sort of small-scale, medium-scale quantum computer, to a stage where you can really run interesting applications on it. And this is a huge challenge that I'm very grateful our excellent hardware-focused colleagues are working on all over the world right now. But I mean, I think it's easy, at least if you read the media articles, to think, okay, well, all of the challenges have been overcome, and now it's just a case of building them bigger and sticking more qubits in, and the applications and money rolls in. But I personally feel, and I suspect perhaps my colleagues on the panel would too, that we're not at that stage yet. There are still some challenges to overcome. So I think that this is really important. But I think as well as this, and I think this was also mentioned by Sebastian, like that there are some real sort of, let's say, management challenges associated with things like a lack of talent, so a restricted talent pool, the fact that there are really only a very limited number of people at the moment who are able to work in this area and are set up to really contribute to a quantum startup or a larger sort of quantum technologies company. And also, I think just this very high level of excitement that everyone's feeling about the quantum space at the moment, like this can sometimes tip over into hype, and I think this is a big difficulty for all of us to deal with, because You know, it's great to talk to a potential investor, say, who has a very high level of enthusiasm, but you know, sometimes it's important to sort of tone this down and try to be realistic about what is achievable, because I mean, I personally feel that there are many exciting, realistic, achievable applications out there, and you know, I want to sort of get there and not you know, have an implosion before that point. So I think this is a very difficult tightrope to walk, but in some sense, it's a good problem to have, because at least there is that excitement to begin with, which is important to capitalize on.
That's great. That's great. I agree. Christina, what do you think the biggest challenges in the industry right now?
I must agree with Ashley. I think the main challenge is we don't have 1,000 qubits, right? I mean, that's it's really the elephant in the room, and we call it at Orca, we call it the quantum gap, because we see a lot of demand from industry, and then we see quite a lot of people and companies working at the algorithms and software level, and the reality is that they're pushing as hard as possible with what they have, but ultimately they will need that machine that has the number of qubits necessary for meaningful problems and solutions. So yes, there's no way around it. I think it's putting in the work and the time and just pushing forward. I think everyone is excited about it, and I think we're at a point where few people from within the industry doubt that it's possible. I mean, I think it's just a matter of, you know, fine-tuning those roadmaps and expectations around timelines. Maybe related to this big challenge is how do we manage those roadmaps and provide a level of certainty to all of the corporates and industry players who want to start using a quantum computer. I mean, what are we telling them? Are we telling Denise, we were talking about this the other day, where are we saying 5 years from now every year? Is that our best answer? Can we be a little better, or can we qualify and maybe focus on a different instead of the number of qubits, maybe on other milestones? That's the second challenge I would highlight.
Okay, Sebastian, what challenges do you see?
Oh, well, difficult to be the last one in this particular one. I think I agree with everything that's been said, and I think a key point, you know, was just mentioned by Christina, which I think is the exciting thing in all of this. While there are lots of challenges, I think we can now confidently say that we will eventually build a quantum computer which will really change, you know, society on a profound level. And I think that's the exciting thing. Go back five odd years, you know, you would have encountered a lot more skepticism, and I think that's fantastic. It's a great position to be in. When we then think about the challenges associated with that, I think there's three things for me. One is money, and I think that for us at least, and I don't want to say what challenges other people have, but I think we feel like we roughly know what we're doing, roughly know where we're going, and we understand the challenges, and we feel we know what needs to be done there, and money can go a long way there. And I think with money, you can start to address some of the talent bottlenecks as well. Generally, we need to train more, and I think that is something that needs to be addressed on a much bigger scale. But also, we need to stay competitive with the Americans, with Asia, etc. And money helps. Right, you know, it's great people being passionate about your technology, but you need to be able to pay similar salaries, etc. So I think money goes a long way. Talent is a challenge, and I think the other one, which really does worry me, is the bridging this gap between where we are right now and where we will actually very clearly show how great quantum computing actually is and what it changes. And I think because of the timescales involved that we all are aware of, there's a lot of communication and, you know, cautiousness that we have to bring in to keep people engaged long enough. And I am very worried that with all these announcements out there, when in 3-4 years time, people realize, oh, wait a minute, you know, IBM said 1 million qubits in 8 years or 10 years time, and after 5 years they're not at 100,000. I'm getting worried, right? And I think that's a huge risk to all of us in the industry, that we burn this out before we actually, you know, get to show off how awesome this is really going to be. And I think we all have to be really mindful on how we're going to manage that. And I think that will be tough.
So kind of we're leading in, I've had a couple of questions about the IBM announcement, and I don't want to get to specific vendors, but since I've been involved in quantum computing 5+ years, every year I've heard it's 5 to 10 years away. And it was that same way in 2015 as it is in 2020. It's 5 to 10 years away. And so when you all talk about quantum computing and when the timing is for a truly quantum solution, how do you answer that question? Maybe
what do you mean by truly quantum solution? That would be my first question back. I think realistically, I think that the difference is, and you're right, 5 years ago people said 10 years, 10 years ago people said probably 10 years. The difference is that now we can really say it will happen. And I think that is a big thing we shouldn't underestimate. Like I said, I will not be the next person to say, well, just give us another 10 years. I think the great thing is that I don't see this huge step where nothing, and then there's just awesomeness everywhere. I don't think that would happen. I think we will see some really great early applications, and Ashley mentioned some of those already that he's super excited about, and others as well, where the machines will start to reach this sort of sizes where we can start doing some interesting things. But it is important to say we are a while away from doing those truly amazing things with quantum computers. That is the truth that we all have to own up to. But that doesn't mean to say we're growing an entire new industry here, right? So with all the great work that lots of startups and bigger companies are doing right now, engaging the community, doing application work, starting to solve these engineering challenges, that just needs time. And it's great that we're doing this work. It's great that we're making machines accessible, play with them, use that to train talent, right? That's a big part. Engage, people who would have never considered quantum computing otherwise. I think that's all part of the mix.
I think, I'll say something as well. I feel this is a very, very important question, but I think one point is it may not be the same people who are saying 5 to 10 years at each of these time points, right? 2012, 2020, and so on. I remember, I applied for a grant in 2012, and one of the referee comments I got back was, there's been a lot of very impressive progress in quantum computing in recent years. It's even possible we'll see a quantum computer in the applicant's lifetime. And this was, 2012, and then, in 2019, we see a quantum computer that outperforms the world's best supercomputer for a problem which is maybe a contrived problem, but it is nevertheless a well-defined problem that the quantum computer did something that we just can't do with our standard computers. So I think, we always would like progress to be quicker, but I think, to me, as a sort of somewhat of an outsider from the sort of hardware community, I think the progress has been very rapid, and I think I find it extremely impressive where we've got to.
Great. Ashley, I'd like to hear from the panel what people think are the most exciting applications for quantum computing. And it's a bit of a tricky question because I think there's limitless things that we can do, and we're challenged really just by our own creativity. But I don't know if you feel that there's specific applications that you think would be, would be world changing, or what you guys are thinking about.
Sure. I think, for us, the most exciting near-term applications are really in this domain of modeling quantum systems and simulating them. And I guess you can get a sense of the areas we find exciting by looking at some of the things we've been working on. We've spent a lot of time thinking about the Fermi-Hubbard model, this famous model in condensed matter physics. And we've developed the world's fastest algorithms for several different quantum simulation kind of challenges in this area. And that's something which, it's an exciting system from a fundamental physics point of view, but it's also the basis for understanding many other more complicated and more realistic physical systems, which will help us understand things like battery materials, solar cells, potentially leading on to things like pharmaceuticals later on. This is, we feel, longer term. And this, in the end, will unlock applications like designing higher density batteries, designing batteries with better properties. For example, something that you may even have seen in the news recently is very important to reduce the amount of cobalt in batteries, because there's various reasons you don't want too much. For example, it's mostly sourced from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where there's a lot of challenges to do with human rights and also just scarcity of this material. So that's something you really want to cut down on. But our current modelling techniques are just insufficient to understand how different battery materials perform a lot of the time, and quantum computers could help alleviate that and really unlock whole new areas of applications. And this is the kind of thing we think is really exciting at the moment and for the next few years. But as I think Sebastian said before, like, we also think that this is going to go far beyond, let's say, just material science, and there'll be many more exciting applications as the years go by, and as we head towards this full, fault-tolerant quantum computer that we're all hoping for eventually. So we think, it's early days, but we think even these applications in this sort of NISQ era will already sort of amply justify the investment involved in getting into this space now.
Okay. Christina, Sebastian, anything to add on killer apps or what you think is coming next?
Well, on our end, we're one step removed from maybe the ultimate application, in the sense that for now what we're focusing on is more on specific mathematical problems and making sure that we can actually provide the hardware to solve those, paired with the first layer of software. So problems such as optimization, differential equations, factorization, linear algebra in clustering or classifying. These are all very exciting problems that then hopefully, once those are better refined, then can go and be applied to computational fluid dynamics, material discovery, and financial logistics. So there's a lot of industries that will benefit from this, but for us, it's very important to make that connection between the hardware and the underlying mathematics. And we feel that, well, I suppose it's normal, but it's not as discussed in the industry. Again, I think that was more so the case before, where everyone was just, whenever you asked about quantum use cases, they would just name the four, like financials, pharmaceuticals, blah, blah, blah. And now we're getting a little bit more sophisticated in really diving into some of these use cases and really finding what is it in the math.
Sebastian, do you want to add, or should I move on?
I think maybe just one high-level point to make. I think depending who's exactly sitting in the audience, I think we're only at the beginning of really understanding what quantum computers will eventually be able to do. And I think that is really exciting, because we already know some of those amazing applications. There's a lot more to come. And I think, again, it comes down to, attracting more talent into this field. We need more Ashleys to think about what to do with these machines, get more potential end users involved to learn about their computational challenges and do some of that key translation work between quantum and what's challenging in the classical computing world, so to speak. So I think, again, attracting more people, attracting more money, it is key here to just improve on this significantly. So I think I just wanted to make that point, that not that people think, hey, whatever I read about in terms of the application of quantum computing right now, that's it. We're really only understanding a small fraction of what these machines will really be able to do down the line.
Agreed. I think the limit right now is our imagination, and as soon as we have bigger machines, I think we're going to be thinking of a lot bigger problems.
And that's where our host, Cambridge Quantum Computing, come in as well, right? I mean, small thing to you guys as well, of course.
Thank you. Do you guys think that, Ashley, this is maybe a little directed towards you, I'm picking on you, but when you ultimately look at software solutions, do you think that we're going to run certain types of software solutions on certain types of quantum computers, or do you think it's going to be just the fastest, or what are you thinking about matching hardware and applications?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, because, for me, the jury is still out a little bit on this one. So, it's clear that different hardware platforms have different advantages and disadvantages. For example, one may have a faster clock speed, the other one, it may be easier to have more qubits, maybe better coherence times, and so on. And So at the moment, there are absolutely algorithms which are more suited to one than another. For example, if you have this kind of variational algorithm which involves running the quantum computer many times, many shots, then you may want one that has a faster clock speed. But on the other hand, we're sort of still in this 1940s era of computing, right, in the quantum world. At least that's what we found. We might hope that we're in the 50s, perhaps, I don't know. But we're still at this stage where you have to work really closely with the hardware to get the most out of the systems. And to me, it's not clear whether in a few years' time that some of these platforms will have sort of equilibrated a bit, and that you will at that point start not needing to know quite so much about the intricacies of the hardware, but it's also it's not yet completely clear to me if we will see multiple hardware platforms sort of proliferating, and we'll in 10 years' time we'll still have ion trap quantum computers, superconducting quantum computers, and optical quantum computers, and these different architectures, or if we will start seeing some consolidation. Because I have to say, I would have expected already to see more consolidation than we have, and in fact it's gone the other way, and we've seen more interesting architectures springing up and more different technologies. So I think I think basically I don't know the answer to the question, but I think it's really going to be very interesting over the next year finding out that answer.
I agree. I think Christina and Sebastian. Christina, do you have any opinions that your hardware is better suited towards certain applications or not, or have you thought that far ahead?
I mean, we do have intuitions, but we don't have answers just yet. I think, as we said, the jury's still out. What we think, and this is just our, by no means we have, we don't have a crystal ball, but what we think is that probably within the next few years, we'll still see different applications for different platforms, and each application really trying to get the most out of each platform. And it'll be a combination of easier access, faster speeds, and more robust or modular approaches. But as the industry develops, we will see conversions. I think that's, if you look at the history of technology development, over centuries, that's what you see. You see certain conversions, and then potentially again a certain divergence. I mean, if you look at some of the chips that are currently being made for specific machine learning applications, this is actually a divergence from the computing universal classical computer that we have had for the past few years. So it just goes in waves, and when for us the challenge as a company is to develop a technology that and understand where the wave, not where the wave is currently at, but where the wave will be in the next few months and years. And that's that's a bit of an art and a science.
Okay. So getting a lot of questions from the audience. So Ross Duncan, Ariana, Eddie, one of the questions is what you all think about the recent acquisition of by NVIDIA of ARM. And even though that's classical computing, are there any conclusions that you drew from seeing that, or any comments you want to make on that? Certainly was a huge price.
I think, it's, well, lots of things one could say about that. I mean, translating that to maybe quantum computing a little bit is, us as UK companies, I think we should, quantum computing is a technology which I think every country needs to have access to eventually, right? Every sovereign nation needs to, if they want to be serious down the line, they need to have access to this sort of technology. And I think, I would hope that the UK will be in a position where they can support, large quantum computing companies down the line, and they won't get bought up by the companies. Now, in this case, ARM was already owned by someone else anyway, so that analogy doesn't quite work. But I think generally, I'd hope that we can keep this quantum computing knowledge in the UK for indefinitely, so to speak, and it won't just be one of these acquisitions where it then leaves the UK. But that's maybe one of the things I'd say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree with Sebastian. I mean, I think that the sort of geopolitical angle is probably a bit above my pay grade to comment on too much, but I think I feel like this really is somehow a cautionary tale, in the sense that ARM is first acquired by SoftBank, who say, okay, we'll be very hands-off, everything will, stay exactly as it is, etc. There'll be, various nice sort of perks and so on. And then, before too long, is then essentially acquired by NVIDIA, which, seems a much more sort of uneasy matchup, perhaps. And I think it will, perhaps on a slightly smaller scale, but I think it will be very interesting to see in the next few years what happens in terms of quantum hardware companies, in terms of any consolidation that may happen there, because indeed, like the UK is developing a lot of really exciting technology, like both on the hardware and the software. And there's always this sort of really tricky balance in trying to sort of encourage inward investment while not sort of giving up your crown jewels. And I think that it will be very interesting to see how the UK government, let's say, but also the companies themselves react to these challenges in the next few years.
I agree. That's a really good answer. And I think consolidation, it shows an appetite for high performance computing. It shows an appetite to extend the capabilities of computing, and how that impacts this industry will be very interesting. So far, we have yet to see an acquisition of a hardware company, but who knows what's going to happen in the future. Okay, some more questions from Eddie. As an audience, how can we help you guys succeed?
Engage. It depends who you are, but engage in any way that you can, and this will mean different things to different people in the audience. I think that would be my very short and quick answer. But I think I think the point is that right now is a really good time to engage. No matter where you sit, I think you can either learn a lot from engaging. That's the minimum that you're going to get out of this. Understand how, if you are a potential end user, how quantum computing may impact your market, your company going forward. If you're someone who'd love to contribute, join one of these many companies out there and really enjoy the ride. I think I would generally just say engage. That'd be my key message. And you're already, I guess, engaging by being on this webinar, but engage more.
Okay, engage with startups. How's that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? There's a number of them that are pretty deep that I'm gonna skip. But I'll ask Ashley one just to give Ashley another chance to talk. This is from Ross, so I'm going to attribute it. A lot of work in quantum computing applications now focus on quantum simulation. What prospects and techniques do you think might yield practical quantum advantage for more general optimization problems?
Okay, so this is also, I think it's a fairly deep question. So I think, as I think, Ross and probably many in the audience know, like you can think of quantum optimization algorithms as falling into two classes: the ones where we have rigorous bounds on their performance, like Grover's algorithm, and the ones which are heuristics, where we think they're kind of interesting, but we don't necessarily know whether they're going to work very well, and we do need to try them and find out. And I think that the former class, like the rigorous kind, there seems little doubt that they will ultimately work. What's kind of up for debate is whether they will really see a significant improvement over the classical optimization techniques when all of the overheads are taken into account, and also if we'll need to wait a very long time and have a very high performance quantum computer with lots of fault tolerance to be able to get to that stage. And these more heuristic algorithms, these are things you can run now on your cloud-based quantum computer, but at the moment you're not going to see a performance improvement over your best classical techniques. So I think, I would say that I'm a bit of an optimist about both of these. In that I think that at some point you will see an advantage over classical optimization methods using them, because I think we have enough theoretical evidence that something interesting is going on beyond what we can do classically to be sort of fairly confident of that. But what I guess I'm a little less sure on is the timeline really, and how long it will take us to get to this point. So I think this is obviously something you can try to reduce this length of time by coming up with new algorithms, and I would definitely encourage people to do this. But I think to me it just seems a bit further off than these sort of simulation type applications which we've discussed.
Great. So we have a couple minutes left. I'm getting a text saying, "Move it, girl." And one of my questions is, how do we get to larger scale machines? What innovation do you think is going to, I think Sebastian talked, or Christina, about adding qubits one by one. How do we really get to the large scale machines? Is it modularization? Is it new technologies? Would love to hear all of your inputs.
I'm happy
Christina,
to. I'm happy to just jump in, and I think I said it earlier, but our approach is to focus on building a modular block and then pairing it up with an architecture that scales. And I mean, obviously, that's easily said than done. There's a few technical challenges and engineering challenges that need to be overcome. But thinking in those broad terms, I think will benefit quite a lot the industry. And I mean, I don't have visibility into beyond what they shared with the public into some of the older, more established platforms. But I think just shift, it's sometimes hard to shift a whole team of a lot of engineers that have been working one direction into thinking about the problem differently. And so in a way, I think, I'm very excited about new approaches, new companies coming in, I mean, including Orca, obviously, and looking at the problem from a different point of view with the learnings that we have.
Yeah, I mean,
so one, or Sebastian, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one thing for my side that I'd maybe add is as simple as it sounds, but it's really focusing on making sure that what you build and what you have in your early quantum computers still works at 1 million qubits. And it's this very in a way simple mindset that we have to our core at Universal Quantum is everything we build, we try to build is basically needs to stand that test. Would it still work at 1 million qubits? If not, well, you have some questions to answer, and I think that sort of approach is absolutely key to us. And what we feel strongly is that we feel we may have a good angle where it comes down to bringing in really key engineering talent. Not the quantum guys that they're required as well, but to actually focus on marrying the quantum with that sort of classical engineering, which scale it up. That's for Universal Quantum absolutely key. I think it's quite often if you actually evaluate some of the machines that are currently out there and considered as leading in terms of the specifications that they may have on the qubit numbers or so, and you look under the hood, I would dare people to see how much of that would still work at 1 million qubits, and I think you'd be very surprised the answer that you get.
So that was my next question, is whether you think today's current machine, so what's working today, is really extensible. They're adding 5 qubits, 10 qubits, but is that really an architecture that's extensible to get to thousands or even hundreds or thousands of qubits? Like, can that be done, or is it going to be a complete redo?
I will only go as far as saying I'm skeptical. I don't want to, I'm not an expert in superconducting qubit per se, and I'm sure those guys, they're great, super smart, and I'm sure they have great plans forward. But I think looking at what happened in the last few years and what the sort of plans for the next couple of years are, I think it is clear that it's not so straightforward for them to say, hey, we can just naturally go up to 1,000 qubits or so, otherwise we'd be much closer to that. And I think this is why we always see these sort of things. Let's add another 5 qubits or 10 qubits or so. So there are really challenges, and but I think for us it's different. But I don't really want to comment on other people's architecture too much.
Yeah. Ashley, do you want to say anything to wrap this up? We're running out of time, and I want to give you some time to talk if there's any other comments you want to make.
I guess not. I think we covered a lot of interesting ground so far, so really appreciate that. I think we sort of covered what we think of as the most exciting applications, and also some of the challenges. But I think that kind of sums up the stage that we're at the moment of quantum computing. So yeah, so I think, I mean, this conference as a whole, the parts of it I've been able to attend has been fantastic. I really enjoyed the talks, and I think there's so much excitement around at the moment. I really hope that we can harness this to do something really important over the coming few years.
Christina?
Yeah,
Anything?
no, I think we're at an exciting point where we're learning to manage expectations, but at the same time, there's a lot of progress that's going to happen in the next couple of years. So yeah, I think, all as a bulk, I think the industry is doing things in the right way.
And Sebastian?
I mean, I'm just super excited. I'm super excited where we are with this field at the moment. I think it's amazing that we can all be part of this journey, right? We're developing a technology which is set to change the world in a profound level, and I think that's fantastic. And I think it's really the sort of time where it is time for people to get involved, and I think that's super exciting. And I think through these conferences, which has been really interesting so far, I think that they're all great steps forward. And I think especially these panels where we maybe do ask challenging questions in terms of scalability and what is required to get us where we all ultimately would like to be is really nice, and it's really important, I think, that we have those conversations. So thank you for setting that up. That's been really great.
Well, thank you, everyone. I want to do a call out to Ross Duncan and Katie Isham for organizing the Quantum Week of Fun. When I look at the signups for that, I think any paid-for conference would kill to have the amount of people that you've attracted with such a great agenda and such great speakers. So I want to thank you for all your work and congratulate you on the success of the conference. And then I'll say thank you to the panelists for an interesting discussion, especially about focusing on the UK, which is, I think, a powerhouse in quantum computing, and I hope that will continue to build.